Thanks for tuning in to the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
I'm Sara.
And I'm Jennie.
And we're your hosts, two friends who immediately bonded over our secret smut addictions. So join us as we journey together through our favorite romance and fantasy stories and discuss all things kinks, female pleasure, taboos, and more.
Make sure to check out the show notes for any spoiler alerts and content warnings. We're happy you're here. Let's get to today's pod. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Thirsty. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Had a nice morning.
Excellent.
I'm excited to talk about this book with you today.
I am as well. We co-read a book for you guys based on a recommendation from a friend of mine. And I'm going to let Sara kind of lead us into a bit of a synopsis about it.
Yeah, so today we were talking about A Marvellous Light, which I have been texting to Jennie as Marvlight.
You love a good abbreviation.
Love to breathe. The author is Freya Marske. I hope I am saying that right. And here is the synopsis. Sir Robin Blythe is more brawn than brains, though he is affable and kind, and a notably good big brother. After the death of his financially irresponsible parents, Robin is forced to take a seemingly mundane government job. It turns out this job is anything but. He is the new liaison between the magical and non-magical governments, and oops, his predecessor was involved in some nasty business that's now threatening Robin. Edwin Corsi, his socially inept and low-powered magical counterpart, is forced to step in and help Robin after a magical attack leaves the latter cursed. They travel to Edwin's family home, where Robin is exposed to both the wonders and dangers of the magical community. As they work to cure Robin, they uncover a sinister plot that threatens the whole of the magical world, and their closeness begins to grow from animosity to friendship to something much greater.
Oh, you were so good. You're so good. I loved it. It was the perfect synopsis.
Thank you.
Yeah, so where do you want to start?
I think I would love to talk about, before we get into the themes, just, first of all, this is the first new book that we have read together.
Yes.
Everything else we have read, it's either been you recommending something to me or vice versa, and doing either a reread or re-listen or what have you. And so I think it was kind of, it was a little like unmooring in a fun way to me, especially because you were ahead of me. Which never, not to no shade, but it never happens because, as our dear listeners may know, you are an audiobook reader and I am a visual book reader. Mm-hmm. Never said that before.
I love that. Audio, visual.
Yeah.
Great distinction. That's what it is.
And so I guess the reason why I was going a little bit more slowly is because I kept putting this book down. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. But it was easy for me to disengage with. So I think that will be something we talk about today.
Yeah. I maybe was able to get through it quicker because by the nature of audiobooks, like I walk the dog every day, and if I'm folding laundry, I'm listening, and if I'm going for a walk, I'm listening. So like I think I just had more access to time for this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I enjoyed it. I wasn't like gripped the way some books can just, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to clear my schedule. I have to read, this book until I finish it. It wasn't gripped like that, but that's not to say that I didn't enjoy it. I found it very enjoyable. I do agree with you that it was an interesting thing to have somebody like say, hey, I think this is a great book that you would like. And yeah, it would probably work for your podcast. And then to suggest it and be like, okay, we're going to just read it because it was recommended, and, very little research other than reading the book summary online. So yeah, we didn't have any anchor in anything other than, oh, this might be a good book. Let's see if we enjoy it.
Yeah. And I've not seen this book on social media at all. I'm pretty immersed in the Bookstagram world. I do our social media, for this podcast. And so, and I had not seen anything about this. Granted, I do think social media, Book Talk, Bookstagram skews hetero.
True.
So, and this is notably a queer love story. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason we were like, oh, a queer love story. We absolutely want to read this.
Yes.
Especially because it's not romance, it's romantasy.
Yes.
So it's, I feel like, even more rare. Sometimes you get, romantasy, you get a throuple or something, like there's definitely like queer aspects, but a straight, like this is a man, they're falling in love, there's magic. A bit more rare, yes. I think.
And refreshing and delightful. So delightful.
Yes, that's exactly the right word to use. It's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Like truly, that was my favorite part of the book, was the love story element of these two people, and it makes so much sense why they're falling in love with each other and the progression of how they fall in love. You get both of their points of view, which I always enjoy as a reader. And you get to see kind of like the who falls first going on, the things they don't know about themselves that the other person is observing, the way that they realize they bring out the best in one another. And it's more, and like the way that the other person makes them feel, and not just in an I feel loved sense, but like specifically with Edwin, Robin makes him feel safe.
Yes.
Just gorgeous in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful hallmark of romantasy stories, is when you do get the perspective of all of the characters involved from their internal dialogue, which we got a bit of in this as well. And so I think that's why I'm saying it was delightful and sweet and just a lovely departure to, you know, get the inner workings of two men falling in love.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I do want to note, this is the first book in a trilogy, and each of the books is a queer love story, but I started reading the second book. You have not yet started the second one. But the second book follows the same magical story, but it's a different love story. So the second book is a female-female relationship developing. And so I cannot think of any other series or trilogy where that's happened. You know, I would absolutely love if there's any other ones that you guys know about. Please tell us. We'll do some research and try to find some more, but because I know they're out there. But as you said, they're not. I think that social media and, you know, the evil algorithm probably does center a lot of heteronormative relationships.
Yes, yes. But I definitely think it's a very queer community as well. Mm-hmm. So that's so interesting to me. Yeah, again, like Sarah Simone, the Priest trilogy, the third book is a male-male love story, but the previous two are hetero. So, yeah, the fact that all three are queer, and they notably take place in a time period where queerness is illegal.
Yes. Still. Yes, and so but I also think that element is handled beautifully in this story. It's not, I almost expect those stories to be written like where the men are in the closet, or there's a lot of shame. And while there is secrecy and privacy in this, that's not an overarching big theme of like, oh, we're doing something wrong, or, you know, we're doing, you know, this is a scandal. Like, they do recognize how their society works and how they're viewed, but it's not, I felt it wasn't like riddled with shame or secrecy. It was more privacy, and I'm making these choices, and it's up to the people who are involved to express who they are, not, you know, for other people to out them. Or
that's such a good point. You don't have anxiety about, like, the people in their world generally know that they're queer. Not everybody, but like a lot of the time it's like, yeah, I kind of knew that about you. Yeah. And it's okay. You don't get the sense of like they're going to be reported, but at the same time, there is a sense of, there's definitely sadness that both the characters express internally. I don't know that they do to each other, but they definitely both have thoughts of, I just wish I could be open about this. Like, I wish I could hold your hand walking down the street. I wish you could stay the night in my room. So you're aware of the constraints of the time period. But again, that's such a good point that like they don't feel like there's anything wrong with them. Right. They're like, I'm gay. Yeah. I like men. And the way that they figure out that each other is gay is kind of, it happens early.
Yes, it does.
And it's pretty natural. It's not like, it's small, subtle hints, I guess, that they're both kind of like looking at each other being like, oh.
Yes, it is. They're kind of feeling each other out. But I think that the way that they do it, you know, in like my relationships in the past with men, there's also that sweet like, oh, do you like me? Do I like you? Can I open this door? Are we just friends? And I think they kind of do start out as friends, now that I'm remembering some of the specifics. I think there's one where like Robin really needs to know that they are friends.
Yes.
There's like, he has a need for safety. I think I'm attributing it to the right character, that like he's feeling a need for safety. So he says, I am your friend, or like, we're friends.
We're friends.
Just kind of doing that check-in there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and Edwin's like, I guess. Edwin is, I'm going to put this away.
Yes.
Edwin is so interesting. I guess. Part of what works is like these characters are very fleshed out. Mm-hmm. And Robin, as I said, is this like kind of, I've seen him online described as a himbo. I wouldn't say it's that far. He's not totally dumb, but he is like, he's this jock. He played sports. He didn't do a lot. He didn't really pay attention in school. He grew up privileged, but now he's kind of in this like semi-privileged state where he has a title but no money. Mm-hmm. He's so social. Like he's so charming. He's got a lot of emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. He knows how to interact with every single person he comes into contact with. And a lot of the time it's in a situation where he should feel extremely awkward, but he is super chill. Mm-hmm. He's cool.
He is cool.
He would be the cool guy at school. Agreed. Yeah. And Edwin is not. Edwin is extremely intellectual with very low emotional intelligence and is like beep boop in social interactions.
Totally.
I think we could probably say he's maybe on the spectrum.
Yes.
Although that's not part of the story in any way, but the way he acts, especially in social settings, and he feels constantly outcast and he feels isolated and lonely in every single social situation he's in, from his family to strangers to acquaintances. You even get the sense that in his past relationship with his past lover that he felt outcast.
Yes.
Devastating. He's a very, you feel a lot of fondness for Edwin, even though he's often quite cold. Mm-hmm.
He's endearing.
Yes. You really don't, you like both of them greatly, even though I think you're maybe meant to dislike Edwin a little bit more. I didn't. I thought he was just a sweet, precious baby who just has a lot of trouble navigating his way through the world and a lot of trauma.
Yes. Which you begin to understand through the story when they visit his family home and you meet some of his family.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
His family sucks.
They're not great. They're not great.
Yeah. But his mom is lovely.
True.
Although maybe, she didn't protect him as he deserved, but also you think about the time period as a woman, as a mother, she did not have the power in that family to protect her like weakest quote unquote child.
Yes. And is herself suffering from mental illness, a debilitating mental illness that keeps her, to her room most of the time. Which is an interesting thing to think of as a product of the time, which I can't now, I know it's set back, but I can't remember the exact
I think it's
years.
1918.
1918. Okay, so we're in the very early 1900s. So 100,
because the suffragette movement is something Maud is lightly being involved in.
Robin's sister.
Yeah, who is the title character or the main character of the second book.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting portrayal for Edwin's mom to have a mental illness and like take to her room.
Yes.
And Edwin has to go visit her in her room, but that's where he feels safe. And that's where he feels like he can kind of let down that mask a little bit and, unmask and just be him and be loved and adored and heard.
You're perfectly leading into one of my themes, which I think is, to me, as we were briefly chatting yesterday when I was over here and I kind of started talking about this. My favorite part of the book was this, which is, there's magic users, and there's kind of just, you're born to a different amount of power.
Yes.
And Edwin, though extremely intelligent and interested in magic in a way that nobody else around him seems to be, he wants to invent new magic and like hack magic almost. He's like so interested. He creates new spells, but he has very little power to do those spells. Mm-hmm. And his siblings, meanwhile, have tons of power. And he therefore is made to feel totally inept and like magic is just something that is always going to be just out of his reach. In this world, this 1918 patriarchal world, women are not taught how to use magic, only men. Now some women are born with great power, but it's kind of like have fun with that, and they're prize breeding stock as such. I'm so sorry. And so it's a very masculine system of power. And Edwin finds, both through the way he goes to his mother, to this feminine space, mm-hmm. and feels most comfortable. Later in the book, he encounters this older woman who is she actually a relation of it? She's not. She's a relation of his former co-worker.
Yes. I lost the thread there for a second on who
Flora
actually was. Flora. Yes, why they ended up going there. Yes,
so
you're correct.
She's a relation of his former coworker who died, who's involved in this mystery in the beginning of the book. And she is awesome and has set up some of the most powerful magic he's ever seen herself. Mm-hmm. And he sees her do magic, and she's doing it one-handed. Everybody else does it two-handed. She does magic with the earth, working with like seedlings of trees that then grow into these amazing spells and things that he's never seen before. And she says to him, "You have my affinity." And through a series of events, he ends up connecting with the power of her land. Mm-hmm. And as the book progresses, he's realizing that the way she taught herself magic and the way that she does magic suits him better. This feminine archetype system of magic. I feel like I'm talking a long time, but
I love it. No, I'm loving all of it. Keep going.
And this is not I don't think this is making a broad stroke statement about queer people, but I do think that it's notable that a gay man who is diminutive in a way that everybody talks to him about all the time, mm-hmm. in this masculine structure, is not diminutive when he goes into the feminine structure. Oh. And it gives him power. And I feel like that's a very beautiful feminist theme, mm-hmm. and symbol in this series, in this book at least. I'm sure it goes through all three.
Yes, I will keep you posted. I thank you. That was said beautifully. That was my favorite part on the notes that we made. I was like, yes, Sarah, go for it. This is where Sarah and I were saying yesterday that if we could permanently be in university and just take literature classes all the time for free, is how we would spend all of our time. So thank you for your thesis statement on this book.
I would absolutely. This would be the essay I would write about this book.
Yes, and I think it's talking about characters finding themselves and kind of blossoming and seeing them become more of themselves through this story. By the end of the book, through a series of events, Edwin actually inherits Flora's house, her magical house, and he gets to go through all of her journals. And he's so avidly studying her techniques, trying to teach himself how to do her type of magic. So a woman who was told by all of her male relatives and all of society that she wasn't allowed to do magic, they weren't going to train her, it wasn't worth their time, all of this, she was like, that I'm going to go teach myself how to do it, which I think that is an appropriate response when you know you have this large power inside of you, and that probably wants to find some expression and do some good. I don't want to get too much into the second book, but I couldn't remember once they started talking about this early in the second book about the Forsythia Society, which is
not in the first book.
It's not in the first book at all, because they said that. I think that the two women that end up helping them in the end are actually part of this women's society.
Yes.
So that seems to be just a plot point in the second book. Yeah. But I think that Flora was a part of this Forsythia Society, which seems to be a secret society of magical women.
Are they the women who found the last contract?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. That's the sense that I'm getting. And so thank you for confirming that, because I was like, was this mentioned in the first book?
That is mentioned. And what we're talking about is this kind of, not MacGuffin, but kind of a MacGuffin, of three objects that are connected to all of the magic users in all the world. And if someone has control of the objects, they can control everyone's magic. That's my smallest spoiler-free way to say that.
Yeah. I mean, I think
we're giving spoilers.
Spoilers because we want to discuss the book in the plot points. So, yeah.
But I didn't want to jump ahead to some of the
Fair. We don't want to get
talking about later, especially later in the pod.
Did we point out that this world that this book is set in, not everybody has magic?
I don't think we did.
So
Robin is not magical. Maybe.
He's unaware that magic exists.
Yes.
And then he finds out that magic exists. And then as the story progresses, he seems to maybe not have magic, but might have foresight. So he might be able to see the future.
Well, he definitely can.
Well, he can see the future, but I guess we're not entirely sure how magical that is.
If it's something that occurs just randomly to people in general, mm-hmm. or if it only occurs to people who are magical.
Yeah. So through the whole story of them falling in love, Robin is also learning that first, magic exists, and second, what magic actually is and what it does and how it can be used, as he's kind of thrown into this mystery with Edwin.
And the whole culture.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole separate culture with magic. And it, honestly, not a lot of the time it is not great. It's a very cruel culture, from what we experience in this book, at least.
Based on who has the power, what small subset of society. There's society, then there's magical society, and then there's an even smaller subset of that, of the people who have the power.
Correct. And it is extremely hierarchical in that way.
Yes.
Yes, and all of that's definitely very interesting. I don't think it's the most compelling part of the book. I think you'd expect, in a Harry Potter sense, that if you're getting a character who has no knowledge of magic and then gets knowledge of magic, you'd be like awed alongside him, and it would be so compelling. And at times it is. I would say at times it is a little confusing, the descriptions of magic.
Yes.
Unfortunately, magic is very hard to describe clearly, so I have a lot of respect when it's able to be done at all. But, I think that's the part that kind of let me put the book down.
I wonder if that's because Robin doesn't have magic, so it wasn't it wasn't Harry Potter where he finds out magic exists and then he goes to a magical school. Right. It's like he finds out magic exists and he can't do anything about it. He has to rely on all the magical people around him to help him solve the mystery, if you will.
Yeah, that definitely could be part of it. And the magic he is experiencing directly is a curse on himself that's causing him extreme pain.
Yes.
So that's not great.
It's not great. Yeah, his introduction to magic is not great.
No, that's very traumatic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, should we get into some of the other themes?
Please, yes.
So, along with what we're just saying, social falsehoods versus authentic self is big. And not just in terms of, obviously, that relates to the queer love story. Mm-hmm. You're masking or you're being your true self. But also, this magical community is so false.
Yes.
They are so fake to one another. And Edwin is basically like, don't trust any of these guys.
Yeah.
And they're his family.
Yeah, all they want to do is gossip, and all they want to do is fuck with other people. They want to play tricks on and hurt, and yeah,
fraternity hazing from days of yore, or maybe current days
with a magical pond. Mm-hmm. Yes, so there is. You don't really get the authentic self of a lot of the characters, I feel. Everybody has this front. Everybody's trying to protect something, whether it's themselves or some knowledge or secrets or...
I think we get Maud, Robin, Edwin's mom, Miss Morrissey, Edwin's mom, and Flora.
Yes.
Notably, most of them are women, and the men are gay love interest main characters.
Good point.
But there are definitely fake women in this story.
Yes, for sure.
Edwin's sister Belle is a piece of work. Yes, so I think that's always interesting when we explore that aspect of society that absolutely exists regardless of magic. Mm-hmm. Family dynamics and internal family systems. This, again, relates to Edwin's trauma specifically, I think. And it's not, I don't know, we need to talk about this at length.
No, but I think that both Edwin and Robin are dealing with how their family dynamics is affecting their current story. For Robin, his parents had just died, so he becomes the Baron.
I believe so.
A Baron?
Yes. Or Baronet.
Something like that.
Something.
A title.
Yes.
But that happens essentially a week before this story starts. So he's just newly lost his parents, is now, responsible for his 19-year-old sister, who very much wants to go to university, but he knows that his parents would have hated that, but he wants to honor her wishes. So I think in their own way, they're both dealing with their inherited family shit.
Yes.
And so that does inform their choices and their interactions, and also the way that they relate to each other.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Self-doubt versus self-confidence. I think we see this mostly with Edwin.
Yes.
Who is so doubtful of his abilities with magic that he often doesn't even try, and sources out a person of higher power to perform his magical ideas.
Including his shitty older brother.
The older brother? God is him something. It's worse than Farrah's family in the beginning.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, wow.
Yes. Way worse. that gives you an idea. A yardstick. And mostly through Robin, I would say. Edwin, either through necessity, like their lives are at stake, or Robin is in danger, finds a way. He does end up performing these magics, in a way where he's able to do it. And I think that, along with Flora and Sutton Cottage, and realizing there's an alternate path to magic, and that maybe he's just a little bit different, and magic flows through him a little differently, he feels emboldened through Robin loving him to try. Versus you really get the sense in the beginning of the novel that he had resigned himself to his fate.
Yeah. He's learning he's different, not wrong.
Yes. So well said.
Thank you.
Alongside that, how love changes your perspective. In the best way, in the best cases.
Yes. I think that is just a central truth of love in relationships. When you have that love and respect and safety, you are able to become even more of who you are in your truth. And, continually taking off those masks that we create for ourselves.
Yeah.
Love. There's
a really small example of this, and it's not even really what I mean when I'm talking about this theme, but Robin is observing Edwin in Edwin's place of power. He's in a library, and he is studying, and he is on his, that's when Edwin has the most riz, as the children would say. And there's he's very pale and blonde, and light from the window is illuminating his hair, and Robin thinks to himself, he looks like a painting, and he's like, oh my god, this man is so attractive. How did I not see this before? And it's literally a perspective shift where he's observing Edwin's beauty, not just physically, but Edwin is beautiful in that space as well. And Robin's realizing this is a special person. And it completely changes the dynamic of their relationship at that point, which is still working even towards friendship. They're still not even really friends at that point. And I just thought it was one of my favorite descriptions in the book.
Yes, I do think that the prose in this book is beautiful. I think it's beautifully written. I felt swept up in the romance of it. I think sometimes romances can get too flowery and too, they can go over the waterfall and not the best way. I feel like this one really embodied that kind of adoration, and you kind of, I felt myself going, oh, you're just oh, that's really sweet, or that's really what do I mean? The innermost thoughts that I have observing the people that I love. I felt like she really captured that in her writing.
Yes, the part that resonated for me the most was the way that for both of them, I would say, again, mostly Robin making Edwin feel this way, but many times Edwin also making Robin feel safe and calm, which to me is that's how my husband makes me feel. And that's the deepest level of the love I have with him and with my dearest friends is do you feel like you can relax your body and your mind and not even try, it's instinctual. I am always safe with you.
Yes.
And that as the basis for the love that grows from this, it's so real. You don't have to stretch your mind at all to believe this, you guys. You're
Agreed.
Oh, these guys love one another.
Yes.
And there's no tension. There's conflict that happens. It's a story. But it's not they're constantly passionately in a Violet and Xaden way, kind of you figure your shit out, you guys. It's a very mature, you're this is either going to be for the rest of their lives or a very long, meaningful relationship.
Yes.
It's so real and believable. Well written, very well written in that regard.
Agreed.
Yeah. We've pretty much talked about the other two themes, the feminism.
I think we have. Look at us. It was instinctual. Just checking our notes, guys. We, as two neurodivergent, lovely people, we just want to make sure we don't completely go off the rails. So,
yes.
We have our laptops for doing our thing.
Yes.
So I think we both agreed that the romance was almost featured more heavily in comparison to the magic in the book, which was kind of a departure from most romantasy.
Yes.
Romantasy, there's a lot of, at least the ones I've been consuming recently, we know they're going to be this long, epic series. So there's a lot of world building. There's a lot of character development that sometimes can be too much and overwrought. But not so often is this really a romance novel set in a magical world.
Yes. Very well said. 100%. Yeah, I would say romantasy is either 60% fantasy or 50. Like it's exactly 50-50. In this case, I feel like it's 70 to 80% romance. And so if you're really looking for like, I want to learn about a different system of magic set in the like slightly pre-suffragette England, like that sounds interesting. Like I don't know that you will be satisfied with this book. Mm-hmm. You are currently reading the second book, which you said begins to be a bit more compelling in this way.
Yes, it immediately jumps into Maud's story. The book cover says this, so I don't think I'm giving it away, but it's basically Maud is on a boat with somebody, and the somebody is murdered. And so you're immediately, in the first couple of pages, on a Murder on the Orient Express type thing, like contained boat, finite suspects, murder, stolen magical objects. And so you're kind of just like thrown into it. So by nature, there's not a lot of world building. You're on a boat. Mm-hmm. You know that she has the next 6 days on this New York City to London crossing. And for me, the first book was narrated by a male narrator, given that they were two main male characters. This one is a female narrator, and I love her already. I'm the worst in remembering narrators' names. I will put it in the show notes. But she also just like kind of swept me away.
And you're talking about the audiobook narrators in this case, not the characters.
Yes, thank you for that. So you're immediately just thrown into Maud's story, who is a sparkle of awesome in the first book. So I didn't do too much research into what the second book was. I just love a good trilogy. I knew I was going to read it anyway. But then I was like, oh, I get Maud's story. And getting to know more of her, who was already, kind of, what's the word? Spicy is not the word I mean, but she's
badass.
She's badass. Yeah.
Yeah. Maud is like, the way the world is bullshit. My parents who sucked died. Robin, can we be cooler together?
Yeah. Yes. And also, I want to go to Oxford. Let me go to university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let me do my thing, bro.
And then the woman that she meets, who you quickly realize will be her love interest for the story, is dynamic and unapologetic, and I really adore her already. So I do feel like the first book was a little slower in the story development. I still enjoyed it. But the second book, I'm already like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this more than the first book even.
Yeah, because we haven't even really talked about, like, the last contract, the mystery. Mm-hmm. We barely talked about the curse or foresight. Cradling, which is kind of cat's cradle, the way that magic is done and described. Mm-hmm. The various games, like the magic itself, like we barely talked about that, and that's because honestly, guys, it's really not that interesting. It's interesting enough, but I think normally when I'm reading romantasy, like I finish a book in a day. Like Jennie knows this. Like it took me 2 weeks to read this. That's so much, literally 1 to 2 days, you guys. Like a fourth wing, a day and a half. Like I can't remove the book from my hands. My husband gets concerned for me. He's like, are you alive in there?
Yeah.
Like, and I've been this way since I was a child, where I'm just like, zoom. And I get like sucked in.
Yes.
And the world around me passes. The sun goes up and down. Like,
great movie montage visual right there.
Yes. And I lift up my head and I'm like, a day has passed. And I'm like, what world do I live in? Like, that's a very easy state for me to get into with books. And it's usually the fantasy magic elements that do that for me. And the romance is this like perfect little cherry on top that makes me so happy. So I think it kind of clunks along. There is this like, what's the last contract? Is it real? Who's going for it? Who's in danger? There's a plot twist that did get me, who the ultimate big bad ended up being. I was surprised that I was surprised, because there's definitely hints of who it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure you picked up on it.
No, but also I don't read things that have a mystery trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
I'm more of I'm just going to let it happen.
You're along for the ride.
Sometimes if I get a tickle, then I'll be like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Or I'll perk up when certain things happen, like, oh, is this foreshadowing? I don't know, but this is well written, so maybe.
I feel personally offended when I've missed a twist like that.
Sweet.
But also, I really like to miss it because I like to be surprised. So it's an interesting, dynamic.
Control much?
Yeah.
Well, so I have a question, since it didn't grip you as you have mentioned other books did. What was your angst level?
Low. Yeah. I think, I was worried for Robin's health and wellness.
Yeah, it's a little dire in the end.
But, I trusted Edwin to save him. So, in the same way that Robin did. Robin's constantly throughout, this terrible thing's happening to me, but, Edwin's got me. Which is so precious, you guys. Especially because Edwin's like, do I got you? I don't know. I'm a low magic user. But he always comes through. And so you don't feel like, oh God, one of these guys is gonna die. Even when there's a scene where that almost happens, even that I was my heart wasn't racing. Yeah. I wasn't really feeling the anxiety.
So, follow-up question. Do you think that you enjoy, even though I know you don't like enjoying anxiety.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a part of you that maybe gets a little adrenaline rush from reading those books where there are almost constant dire circumstances and you're like, how are they going to get out of this?
Yeah. Again, I think there's a delicate balance for me. I really enjoyed Iron Flame, but it was a little too much for me.
Yeah.
Where I had to force myself to take breaks reading that book because I started getting too overwhelmed in a bad way, too stressed in a bad way.
Yeah.
Versus A Court of Mist and Fury. And I'm just saying this because these are two most recent examples we've talked about. You guys, I've read a lot more books than these two series.
It's true.
Is kind of perfect level for me. Where I'm what's gonna happen? I need to keep reading to find out what happens. Mm-hmm. But I also am everything's gonna be all right. Yeah. So it really depends situationally on what is driving the angst and how often it is kind of perturbing me. But that's a great point. As somebody who's constantly bemoaning the angst in books, this one was angstless, and therefore
you read it slower.
I read it slower. I read it more like a normal human being.
I thought you were gonna say a normal book. A normal human being.
I was I'm gonna read a little bit today. I'm done reading.
So a normal human being.
Instead of I'm gonna read a little bit today. What time is it? Yes.
Anyway, just looking. Yeah, I think.
Do we want to talk about the Fae at all?
No, I think I would like to report back on the Fae.
Okay.
Based on the second book. So you do kind of learn what Sara and I were trying to decide just as we were, digesting the completion of this book. It's mentioned very briefly that the Fae made an agreement with some noble families, and that led to this last contract.
Yes.
So what we were trying to figure out is are the Fae going to be featured heavily in this story?
And are they still around?
Yeah. And I don't think so. Which I think was what we kind of spoke about yesterday. I think that the point was that they left the world and they gave magic to this very specific group of noble families, but I don't think they're here anymore. I don't think this is going to be a going to Prithian or,
And if you're listening and you're what? Fae? That was my experience reading. Suddenly the word Fae is in there and you're what? We were talking about magic users in old-timey England. There's fairies in this book? It's random.
Yeah.
And so that's I was asking Jenny, I was does this come up more in the second book? Because it's in there as an explanation for why there's magic, and that's literally it.
I don't think it's going to come up in the second book, because again, we're on a boat solving a murder mystery. Maybe in the third book for the resolution of the story, but then I think the other part that we talked about is this isn't a magical world. This is a world that we are familiar with that happens to have magic. And so I think that the author maybe needed a way to explain why some people have magic.
Mm.
And that's why it's not a huge detail, just more of an explanation to give some background rather than hey, here's some magic with no explanation.
Yeah. It is just interesting. I feel if this book had been written maybe 20 years ago, it would have been gods instead of Fae. Mm. But Fae is such every fucking book is about the Fae. You guys know I like that, but also I find it's very of the times with romantasy right now.
I also think that anything set in England or Scotland or Ireland is a very
geographical,
fair, folklorish
thing,
explanation.
Absolutely fair.
And especially with this magical house and this woman, you can almost imagine that if there's a magical house, there might be like little pixies, you know, out in the rose garden or something.
Yeah, that's
that
a great
type
point.
of fae. You know,
I know that's the
so
basically vampires fae, as
yeah.
I talked about. That they're basically the same thing right now.
Yeah, regular fae versus high fae.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I don't want to be too snooty, but I did kind of be like, was that an editor? Is that trying to sell this book as like fae romance? You know, like I
didn't get that sense, but I can see what you mean. There's a lot of books being written that have fae.
And hey, you do you, all you guys, because you get that book sold.
Are there fae in your novel?
There are not. There are notably no fae.
Current
there are only witches. Yeah.
So excited to read your novel when it's done.
So, do we want to rate? We haven't even done our rating. We're going to do an episode.
A little mini bonus episode.
Where we describe our rating system.
Yes, because I think our rating systems might be slightly different.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do I know exactly what mine is? No. Is it intuitive? Yes.
Yeah. And that's fine. We just thought it would be a fun little conversation to have. Not at this moment. We can go ahead and rate them, but
yes.
But I think that moving forward, as we collect books on this podcast, having some sort of, again, we're treating this as like our doctorate level project on romantasy, fantasy, and erotica. So we get to decide what our rating system is for this project.
Universities of the world, please give us honorary doctorates.
Based on our love of erotica and our dissection of plot devices, characters, and spice levels.
Yes. So, given all of that,
yes,
if I like the pepper ranking system for spice.
Agreed.
Where green bell pepper is the lowest, and it's like closed door romance. Vampire Academy falls into this, a lot of YA, where it's, you know that they're fucking, but you don't get to hear about it. You don't get to read about it. It happens off screen, so to speak. And then there's, like 1 spicy pepper to 5. And then there's like Carolina Reaper.
Yeah.
Ghost pepper, like off the charts. So I would say this is maybe 1 to 2 spicy peppers.
I would give it 2 spicy peppers because while this is not a book about sex, the sex that is described is frank and honest and graphic. So I would give it 2 spice. 2 spice.
It could be a lot more graphic.
It could also be a lot less.
True. It ended up being a lot spicier than I thought it was going to be because it's quite a slow burn.
Yeah. But I think there's only 3 encounters between the 2 of them that are described.
Yes.
And the first of which is fairly PG-13.
It's something one might experience in middle school or high school, perhaps. If you're a more exploratory youth.
Yeah.
Wasn't my story.
Maybe PG-15. Yeah, I'm just saying, it doesn't go, they don't go full into the TVMA initially. There's one encounter that's, not that we have to classify what makes sex.
Like, but it wasn't like getting me like, oh boy. Yeah. Like, it was more like, these guys love each other.
Figuring it out.
Yeah.
They're so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say 2 spicy peppers for me.
Yeah. And then overall rating, are we doing like 1 to 5? Like, are we doing this numerically?
I like 1 to 5. Could do 1 to 10. I don't know. What do you think? How much delineation do we need in our...
I think 1 to 10 gives more nuance, so I'm interested in that.
Okay.
And
let's try 1 to 10.
For me, this is a 6.5.
I would give it a 7. Yeah. I would give it a 7. I do think I'm going to rate the next 2 books higher, though.
Okay.
This one is a 7. Yeah. And then I will rate the trilogy as a whole as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. We eagerly await your reporting back on this.
Excellent.
We probably will not, at least in this season of the podcast, discuss these books, but if Jenny's like, this actually was life-altering, we got to do it, you know us, we will.
Yeah, of course. Or I may just jot down my thoughts one day and, there'll be bonus content on...
Yeah, we're interested in... We're going to do some hot take pods. We're going to do some smaller, shorter pods here and there.
We're making this up as we go. We're going to do whatever we want to do because it's fun for us. And we hope you enjoy it.
It's like I say about running my coaching business. If I'm meeting with a potential client, I'm like, well, the great thing is I can do whatever the fuck I want. Yes. And that's the same thing here.
Yes, it's great. We're just making it up. We're being creative.
Yeah.
Yay. So overall, we enjoyed it.
Yes, would recommend if you are looking for a very sweet, very believable, realistic queer love story.
Yes. With the potential to continue on with other queer love stories as well.
Yes. If that's not your bag, if you're like, I'm here for the magic, maybe give this one a skip.
Yeah, agreed.
If you have read it, please share your thoughts on socials or send us an email.
Yes. And what are we talking about next week? Oh, you don't remember?
I do remember.
Okay, I'm like,
we're talking about Bridgerton.
We decided after the season 3 first part drop, we need to devote a pod to Bridgerton. The Bridgerton verse? Is there the Quinn verse?
That's a great.
I don't know.
But also it's Shondaland.
And Shondaland, the beautiful intersection of the two.
We are mostly discussing the adaptation, the Netflix show. I have not read any of the books. Jenny has read several of them, not all.
I've read half of the series.
So that will be part of the discussion. So be warned if you do not want to know anything about the books, maybe be warned, but I really think it's going to be a great discussion.
Yeah. There's not much that is important that deviates so far.
Yes.
From the two.
And we're not going to spoil too heavily anything for part 2 of season 3.
No. Would spoil anything for part 2 of season 3. We haven't seen it.
Well, but because you've read the book.
Well, but I still feel like the way that they've set up the characters, I don't think I'm going to know everything that happens because she's veered from this storyline from Colin's book. Yeah. That I still think there's going to be a lot of surprises.
Love it.
Which I'm...
So we can speculate.
Yes, we can speculate. Definitely speculate.
Can't wait. Yeah. Ooh, we should come dressed up a little bit. We'll figure it out.
We'll try. We'll do our best.
Have tea. Anyways. Looking forward to that. Tune in. Obviously, give that one a listen.
Yes. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
We would love to hear what you think about our topics today. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can find us on both with the handle @SpreadYourWingspan. And all of the links and more fun stuff are found on our website, spreadyourwingspan.com.
And if you have a book or author you want us to check out, send us an email at hello@spreadyourwingspan.com to tell us.
We hope you tune into the next episode.